I have a love-hate relationship with the bosses in Super Mario Odyssey. So, here's the thing. In my opinion, Super Mario Odyssey has some of the best boss fights in all of the Mario series. But while some of the bosses are really great highlights of the game, there are also some bosses that are, well, not. This kind of leaves us with an eternal question. Why are some of the bosses in Super Mario Odyssey better than others? What is it that makes the Super Mario Odyssey boss really great? Why are some of them so annoying? And most important of all, which out of all the Super Mario Odyssey boss fights is the best one? And which one is the absolute worst? Well, today we're finally going to investigate those eternal questions, because today we're going to rank all the bosses in Super Mario Odyssey and we're going to put them into a formidable tier list. So you ready? Let's do this! So before we start, we first have to kind of agree what even qualifies as a boss fight in Odyssey in the first place. Well, for the sake of this little video, everything that is categorized as a boss in the Super Mario Wiki is a boss. Hooray! Second, bosses that have rematches, which is basically all of them, count as one boss fight. Awesome. Finally, how are we going to rate all those different and dangerous foes? So, that is kind of unfortunate right now. The thing is, we're still out of fuzzies, so usually we would rate the bosses just using amazing and glorious fuzzies, but I honestly ordered them directly after the power-up video, but they still haven't arrived yet. I mean, I don't blame them. It must be really hard to get fuzzies from the Mushroom Kingdom to Austria, considering the current state of the world and because of all the explosive trees around here. But we can't use fuzzies today. Sorry, I know that sucks, but there really isn't anything we can do about this. Because of this, we're going to rank the different boss fights using the best option that is currently available to us. We're going to rank them using alrightish ninjas. 5 ninjas being the best score, 1 ninja the worst. Apparently. Hooray! So let's jump right into the game and let's start by taking a look at our good old friend, the Mechawiggler. So honestly, I'm not the biggest Mechawiggler fan out there. The fight just has a couple of problems. So let's start with the first and most obvious problem. The tanks are a horrible capture, as we already discussed in way too much detail before. So naturally the fight against the most mechanical of all the Wigglers suffers for it. But there's actually a second thing I don't particularly like about the Mechawiggler fight. It's that the whole fight uses the typical chess boss battle blueprint that Mario games so often fall back to. Basically, that we take turns with the boss. First the boss moves, afterwards it's our turn. Here we hurt the Mechawiggler by shooting every Mechawiggler bubble belly part once. We either manage to hit every Mechawiggler bubble belly part in time, which deals 1 damage, or we struggle so hard with the awkward tank motion controls that we run out of time. It's no even fight where we and the boss try to hit each other all the time. Instead we just take turns. So mechanically speaking, the boss is, at least in my humble opinion, a bit of a train wreck. Does that mean that it is only a single location ninja for the Mechawiggler? Well, no. The thing is, while the fight really isn't that well done on the design side, it's just, bosses are more than the actual gameplay. A good boss serves as a climax and is a visual spectacle and like an exclamation mark that the game sets, and that is something that the Mechawiggler boss actually really succeeds in. There's this thunderstorm, the huge Mechawiggler looks intimidating. It's a really cool showdown against a mighty foe, even if the fight is so easy that the real fight that takes place here is against the tank's aiming controls. So let's go with 2 agreeable ninjas here. Hooray! Next, let's talk about the most evil rabbit aunt in the whole Mushroom Kingdom. Let's talk about Madame Brood and her adorable pet, Jane Choplinkins. So honestly, there isn't that much to say about the fight. She's just fine. There's one thing that I personally find interesting about her, and that is how the decision was made to include her in the first place. So every boss in Odyssey has some kind of priming designed into the stage where they appear, that unconsciously teaches us how to defeat them and how their unique mechanics work. So for example, there are flower pads all over the Lake Kingdom, and one directly before the Rango fight to ensure everyone knows what to do with the flower pad during the fight. The toxic whatever lake before the Octoboss is there to prime us that this liquid disappears if we spray on it while cosplaying as a Gushon. The bullet bills before the Sand Kingdom boss prime us on how his fists work. We have to pull one of those sword thingies out of the ground before the Ancient Dragon. There's even a ground pound spot before we reach the boss that unconsciously primes us to ground pound the huge dragon head later. There are the metal balls and the metal crates before the RoboBrood fight, and so on. So our evil rabbit aunt is built around the chain chomps that were used during all of the Cascade Kingdom before the fight. So what I find personally interesting is the question whether they first came up with the chain chomps and then retrospectively decided that the boss here has to utilize the chain chomp since they were already introduced, or if they first settled for the boss design and then decided that they need to plaster the whole kingdom with dangerous and biting dogs to prime us onto this mechanic. They probably designed the chain chomps first here, but I wouldn't bet on that always being the case. I have this tiny conspiracy theory, for example, that they first had the Octobos design finished, but during testing figured out that the players had trouble to understand that they were supposed to spray his head to defeat him, which, you know, it is kind of an unintuitive mechanic. I do not collapse if you spray water on my head, I believe. Anyway, so they needed to find a way to make it clear that we have to spray water onto his head. So they decided to put lava onto his head first, since spraying water on fire makes a lot more sense. Cool, but now they have to introduce this lava liquid before the boss, and this is, according to my tiny conspiracy theory, this lake's origin story. I completely lost my point again, didn't I? Anyway, back to the most evil rabbit aunt in video gaming history. That's 3 presentable ninjas for Madame Brood. Hooray! The UFO is next. That's 2 finish ninjas. So honestly, I'm not even sure if this is a real boss, but the wiki says it's one, and no wiki has ever been wrong before. Moving on, it's Knucklotec time. That's 3 ninjas. So I have kind of a weird weak spot for this boss. There's a part of me that absolutely knows that the fight isn't that good. We basically only have to wait around for him to finish his attack patterns until we're finally able to hit him once and repeat. The fight is way too easy, and while it is a cool idea to capture the fists and to fly them back into his stone face, there really isn't that much to praise here otherwise. However, I don't know, I know it's silly, and it's probably just me, but the fight has something weirdly epic. There is this amazing lead up to the arena. There is this attack where his fists fly towards us from afar. That just looks so amazing. There's just something weirdly epic about this silly fight against his face and its 2 hands. Anyway, with that being said, Knuckletec has by far the worst rematch out of all the bosses in the game. So the gimmick of the rematch is that now small mummy enemies spawn all over the arena. So first, that's the laziest way to make a fight more difficult, but second, it's so easy to run into one of those mummies by accident, it's not funny anymore. They spawn at basically random spots and without further warning. Check this out, here we commit to a jump and while we're in air, mummies spawn and block the position where we're about to land, leaving us in a situation where we hurt our friend Mario without any fault of our own. That's something that just happens all the time during the rematch. In theory, there are so many interesting ways to make this fight more challenging, like put spikes onto some places in the arena, have Knuckletec cycle through his attacks faster, put down a third hand or whatever, but just spawning random enemies out of the ground at random places is, well, I don't know, it's so lazy. Actually, you know what, let's go with only 2 ninjas here. I'm sorry Knuckletec, I know you're epic, but your rematch is so bad that I just don't want to go with 3 ninjas here. But don't be too sad though, it's only ninjas anyway. Next, Mollusque-Lanceur, or as I like to call him, Octomozart. So I really dislike this fight for a very simple reason. It is too easy. It is simply way too easy. So the way the fight works is the following. We first spray water onto Mollusque-Lanceur's head until he gets a headache and takes damage. Next we fly for a while dodging his attacks until we're able to cause him headaches again by either spraying or by ground pounding. Ouch. So the problem here is that it is almost impossible to take damage during this fight. As long as we don't decide to do anything stupid, his attacks are never going to connect. The fight needs to be 5 times harder for this to work. So here's where this, hopefully, gets interesting. I'm not arguing to make this fight more difficult just for difficulty's sake. Actually, I don't think that bosses in Mario games should be really difficult by any means. The problem is just, if the fight is so much too easy, it just no longer is engaging. So there is this sweet spot of difficulty where a boss is so hard that we have to really play focused and concentrated, but the boss is still easy enough to not be frustrating. In a perfect world, that would basically be the difficulty that every boss in every game should have. So here's the problem. This sweet spot is different for every player. It may actually be different for a single player depending on her mood. Like one day we might feel like grinding a really tough boss challenge for hours, while the next day we just want a quick visual spectacle without thinking too much about it. Add to that every player comes at a different skill level and that everyone comes with a different willingness to try a boss over and over again. And suddenly we have a huge paradox for designing boss fights at the right difficulty. That's, by the way, one of the many reasons why game design is ridiculously complicated to get right, because there is no universally good boss. Every player is looking for something different in a boss fight, and designing a boss in a way that satisfies the maximum number of people is, you know, it's really tricky. So there are several ways to tackle this huge problem, not only of boss but of game design in general. So the first option is the one that is most often used, but in my probably faulty opinion is also the least interesting solution to the problem. It's a difficulty slider. It's letting the players choose if they want the fight or the game or whatever to be easy or hard or insanely hard or just the story difficult or whatever. So most of the time I'm personally not a huge fan of difficulty sliders for reasons that are beyond the scope of this silly little video, but it is one shortcut to our little design paradox that is often used. Luckily, however, there are other possible solutions out there as well. Another one would be to simply say, this is the difficulty of the boss, deal with it. If the boss is too difficult, there might be an optional area to practice, or a way to grind your way out, or maybe even a way to cheese the fight, but we do not make the boss fight easier just because a certain percentage of our player base has troubles getting past this point. That's what the Souls games famously do, and honestly I think that's a valid solution sometimes, and a lot of games could benefit from taking this approach. So don't get me wrong, I do not believe that this is the path that the Mario games should stroll down, but you know, games that in essence are about growth and training and building a team and catching them. It's Pokemon. I'm talking about Pokemon. Pokemon really could benefit from a hard boss every once in a while that blocks our progress if we are horrible trainers, because if the Pokemon games refuse to ever test our abilities as Pokemon trainers, well then we have a bit of a ludonarrative dissonance there, haven't we? Ludonarrative dissonance being a fancy word for saying if game is about becoming a great trainer, but we never have to put any thought into training, or our team composition, or our team, or anything else honestly, then a fundamental feeling the game tries to create and what the game actually is, well, it is in opposition to each other. Awesome, so that was the random Pokemon was better in the old days rant of today. The point being that sometimes games shouldn't go below a certain level of difficulty, because if they go below it, other parts of the game start to suffer for it. But honestly, that's not what I want to see from the Mario games. Mario games don't really need hard and unavoidable boss challenges to function. So what options does a Mario game have to solve this silly little paradox of different people being different? Well, the two best solutions that I'm aware of are either raising the skill ceiling or otherwise just to add perceived danger. So both are techniques that Super Mario Odyssey actually uses to great effect during other fights, but more on this in a second, because we still have to rate Octomozart first. So Octomozart, I don't like you very much. And that is because you settled for the worst solution to the difficulty paradox. You're just so easy that no one will ever get stuck here, and that's why this fight is such a low point of the game in my opinion. Because if the difficulty of the fight is so far away from our actual skill level, then the fight isn't engaging anymore. And you know, that's no big deal per se. There are actually many bosses in Odyssey that are incredibly easy, but that I still find highly enjoyable. The real problem starts when the boss fight then uses the old chess boss battle blueprint, because then taking turns becomes this boring waiting slog. And that's exactly what happens with my least favorite Victorian Octoboss. There's just no way I ever see myself getting hit by the boss, which turns the fight into a waiting minigame. So what is our final score for Mollusque-Lanceur? Well, it's one single and lonely Ninja. Hooray. Next, let's take a look at the 4 Broodal fights, because the 4 Broodals are a great example of one approach to solve the paradox from before. So, first a quick disclaimer. I love the Broodals. They are such good fights. I honestly wish that those silly wedding planning rabbits serve as the blueprint for every boss fight Nintendo designs in the future. Not only for Mario games, but for the Zelda series as well, please. So the thing is, all of the Broodal fights, maybe with the exception of the Moon rematches, are as easy as Mollusque-Lanceur is. They just don't put up much of a fight. The cool thing here, however, is that there are tricks for each Broodal that allow us to kill them faster. And those fast kill tricks are really difficult to get consistently. I probably have beaten each Broodal a couple of dozen times by now, but I'm still not consistent in getting the spike bomb ball back to Harriet the first time. And I still died trying to go for the fast kill during the Rango fight. The Broodal fights basically have a choose your own difficulty mode built into them. The minimum skill level required to beat them is ridiculously low, but there are so many little tricks that players of all skill levels can find something to make the fight engaging. That is what I meant previously by saying that I don't want bosses to be difficult for difficulty's sake. I want bosses to be engaging, and for a boss to be engaging for everyone, it needs to be built around different levels of skill. The fast kills during the Broodal fights are a fantastic way to do this. As for the rankings, that's a perfect score of 5 cute-ish ninjas for Harriet. I love the Harriet fights, trying to get the bombs back to her and quickly stopping her second phase. That's just so much fun. Great job, Harriet. I actually like you so much. I may consider you as a wedding planner for my own wedding, for when the day actually comes. As for a Broodal fight that I enjoy a little bit less, Skewered. So Skewered technically features all the same tricks that make the Harriet boss fight such a highlight, but I can't help myself, but the fast kill here is a bit too easy. Fast killing Skewered just isn't a question of is it worth it to take the risk to end the fight faster? It's just, it's just let's end the fight faster by basically skipping all of the 5. That's just 4 ninjas for you, Skewered. Still a good fight though. As for a fight that suffers from the opposite problem, Rango. So the Rango fast kill is so ridiculously hard to pull off that I still don't get this consistently. So don't get me wrong, learning to get this every time isn't rocket science or anything, but it's a trick that, well, I doubt that many people get this during their first casual playthrough. I can't help myself, but I think this fast kill should actually have been a tiny bit easier to get. 4 ninjas. Finally, let's talk Topper. That's 5 amazing Lishi ninjas for you. Topper, you just strike a really good balance between base difficulty, different fast kill options and a really high skill ceiling, the same way as Harriet does. Good rabbit. Cool, so finally let's take a look at another boss fight that uses some kind of trickery to bridge the gap between the different skill levels of different players and their differing expectations. Let's talk about the most royal Koopa in all of Mario. Let's talk about the man himself. Let's talk about the Bowser fights. I really like the Bowser fights. So first, let's talk about a small trick that is put to good use here. Bowser's Fire Breath attack. So this attack is enormous. When I first saw the gigantic burning firewall that Bowser spits out of his impressive reptile lungs, I remember being really intimidated. I was like, wait, they expect me to dodge that? But I did it. I took all of my courage and performed a perfectly timed flip jump and barely made it through the fire breath alive. That was really engaging. It made me feel like, wow, I did something amazing. So if someone is currently watching this and is thinking something similar happened when I dodged the attack for the first time, then then that's by design. The trick they use here is often called perceived danger. Basically, the fire breath isn't dangerous. It's actually ridiculously easy to dodge. We just perceive it to be this intimidating attack because they make it look much more dangerous than it actually is. So something like this is the perceived hitbox of the thing. It's this gigantic firewall that we're only able to dodge by executing the very perfect jump. So something like this is its actual hitbox. Yep, the part of the fire stream that is actually able to damage us is minimal. So why does that help to make the boss fight engaging for people of different skill levels? Well, because no matter what our skill level actually is, dodging this attack always feels as if we barely made it. Either we actually jump over the whole freaking fire thing, or we actually jump through it. Whatever the case, we feel as if we barely survived. We feel challenged even though the actual hitbox of the thing is so small that it's actually possible to roll over it. It's the same for everyone, yet it is engaging for everyone. It's brilliant and I love this fire breath attack thingy. As for the rest of the fight, I think the way they handled Bowser's head here is really clever. So there is a very clear trend with the boss rating today, and that is that the bosses where we play as Mario generally tend to get better scores than the fights where we play as a capturer. The reason for this is, well, it's basically that Mario just controls better than all of the capturers do, which, it's not that surprising since the team probably spent like 20 times the amount of time to perfect Mario's movement over the time they spent to make the tanks aiming feel as bad as possible, for example. So the bosses we play as Mario usually have a real head start just because of this. The game is about moving around as Mario, but it is also about Mario brutally mind controlling different things using his magical speaking cap. And they probably wanted the Bowser fights to reflect both of that, but most of the captures just aren't developed enough to be used during the final boss. So instead of replacing Mario's moveset during the final fight, they decided to add on top of it by capturing something. The head is the only thing in the game that Mario captures which doesn't replace his normal moveset, but enhances it. And in my opinion, that was the right call here. Hooray! So there's one final thing I really like about the fight. We're almost always in control of how long the fight is going to take. So in theory, the fight uses the old lame chess battle boss blueprint, where it is first Bowser's turn and then you know what I'm talking about. But here we are always in control for how long a phase goes, which goes miles to keep the fight engaging. The Mechawiggler, for example, has this attack where it charges from one side of the arena to the next, which simply takes X amount of time. The only thing that we can do to speed this up is to position ourselves in such a way that the boss travels the shortest distance possible. Which is exactly what speedrunners do, by the way. Anyway, other than that, we always have to wait until our gigantic Mechawiggler is done with his chasey chase. Now contrast this with the Bowser fight. When he shoots the heads, it is entirely up to us for how long it takes us until we grab his punchy head with our own magical cap. If we time it really well, we're even able to skip his jumping around phase and to immediately start the fist fight. If we mess this trick up, then it is up to us how careful and how slowly we want to approach him during his Katamari phase. And then it's back to phase 1. The only time that we aren't in control over the pacing of the fight is during his mega firewall breath thingy, which in my opinion is engaging for reasons we just discussed in way too much detail. Bowser, my dearest single parenting Koopa King. That's a perfect score of 5 incredible, respectable ninjas for you. Great done, well job. Alright, so 4 bosses are left to raid for us, and then we're finally able to find out which boss is the absolute best boss in my opinion, and which boss is the objectively, absolutely worst one. It's Ruined Dragon time. That's the average score of 3 average ninjas. You know the dragon is fine. The fight is a bit slow and we aren't in control when we attack, but on the other hand, the spectacle is just really cool and the fight is visually really well done. It's not my favorite boss mechanically, but if it were gone, I'd probably miss it. Its dragon is fine. Cookatiel is next. Well, I'm not a huge Cookatiel fan, to be honest. The best thing that I can say about this bird is that its vomit attack is really cool. The fight just really suffers from taking place as a lava bubble. The lava bubble capture just isn't that good of a capture, and one of the slowest creatures Mario is able to mind control in the game. That being said, I just can't bring myself to raid the weird evil bird with only a single ninja, so let's go with 2 amazing ninjas here. Even if it is just because the bird made me write down the famous sentence, "Bird vomit so cool," in my notes. Next up, Torkdrift. Thanks, I hate it. What a train wreck of a boss fight. The fight is basically everything I don't like to see in a Super Mario Odyssey boss, condensed into a single ugly UFO. So first, what is this? Like, what is this boss supposed to be? It's this weird UFO thingy, but it vacuums flowers, but it also has eyes, so that it looks at least a tiny bit relatable. Like, I don't know, it looks like something that was casted for a Mega Man game, but took the wrong door somewhere along the way. So look, I could forgive that the boss looks like as if a fidget spinner ate a toad if the actual fight was okay, but well, nope. So first, we have this huge, gigantic UFO, and all that it does is to stand stationary in place, and well, it shoots lasers out of its eye like every 10 seconds or something. Second, the 3 stone pillars that randomly appear and that we have to destroy. Like, there is no context. Like, what are those? They're just random uninspired gameplay elements that they spawn in so that we have something to do. Those uninspired stone pillars are really, like really uninspired in my opinion. Next, the fight is just the same old waiting game. We do something, boss does something, we do something. There's no real way to speed it up. To make matters even worse, the whole fight takes place as a nut. So I don't have anything against nuts in general. Actually, I really like nuts, but as awesome as those little nuts are, they just aren't the best fit for a fast-paced boss battle. Finally, the fight just has nothing epic going on. It's just us waddling around. Sorry, but not sorry, Torkdrift. It's just a single lonely, fuzzy substituting ninja for you. That's the first time today I'm actually glad that I'm out of fuzzies. Also, for anyone waiting for me to finally make the pun about how the fight drove me nuts. Well, it's not gonna happen. Hooray! So one more boss to go, and then we're finally able to answer the eternal question, which boss fight is the best one, and which one is the worst. So let's do this one quick, the RoboBrood. That's 3, kind of cute if you squint while looking at them. ninjas. And the fight is kind of interesting, because there are a couple of things it really nails in my selective opinion, while there are a couple of things where it really falls down flat. So the good stuff first. It's really cool that it is possible to stay on top of the robot after hitting it once. It's really difficult, but just trying to go for it is really interesting and engaging. Second, the boss handles captures during a boss fight in the right way, as I see it. Here, the bird is mainly used to punch back the evil bombs, but other than that, it often makes sense to just use Mario and only to use the bird to deal damage. Finally, I really love that there are those small wooden holes during certain attacks that make it possible to climb the majestic thing. This is such a small touch, but it really goes a long way to avoid the feeling that we're just waiting around. Cool. So why is it only 3 ninjas then? Well, the first and honestly biggest problem that holds the fight back in my opinion is that there is just too much downtime. It just takes too long until the boss stops running around. It takes forever until it finally spits out all those swirling circles, waiting for a Bombi to throw back at it just takes forever. Everything about the fight is just this tiny bit too slow. Second, the swirling and dangerous circle thingies are just too unpredictable. It's really easy to run into one of those things without any wrongdoing of ourselves, which, well, just never should happen. So yeah, overall the RoboBrood is a bit of a mixed bag for me, but I have to admit that it feels like a really fitting final for Bowser's Kingdom. Alright, so finally, here we have it. All Super Mario Odyssey bosses nicely sorted into a remarkable tier list. All that's left to do for us now is to finally answer the eternal question: which Super Mario Odyssey boss fight is the best one? And which one is the worst one? So let's start with the worst one today. So the nominees are Torkdrift for being an uninspiring swirling mess of a boss fight, and Mollusque-Lanceur for being so over the top easy that it hardly feels like a boss fight at all. And the loser, or the winner of the title worst boss fight, or whatever. The worst Super Mario Odyssey boss fight in my opinion is... it's Mollusque-Lanceur. So, look, as much as I hate the fight against Torkdrift, at least there is a tiny little bit of a fight left in this hot burning mess of a boss fight. Sure, it's not really engaging or challenging. Some may even say that they found the fight to be traumatic, but you know, it's something. Octomozart doesn't even manage to jump over this seriously low bar anymore. It's just a complete waste of time, and the fight is symbolic for all the worst practices of Mario boss fights. So congratulations, Mollusque-Lanceur. I'm assuming I nailed the pronunciation throughout all of the video, by the way. So Mollusque-Lanceur, you're officially the worst boss fight in Super Mario Odyssey in my opinion. Congratulations, that's the first really difficult thing you ever achieved. As for the best boss fight, out of all the Odyssey bosses, the nominees are Toppler for being an inconspicuous, small little boss battle that is brilliantly designed to be engaging for players of all skill levels, Bowser for striking a great balance of being engaging to everyone while also serving as a worthy send-off, and Harriet for, well, for the same reasons as Toppler. And the one boss that from now on is allowed to call itself the very best boss in my opinion is not Toppler. So I really appreciate the Toppler fight, but I simply prefer Harriet over him. So the best boss in all of Odyssey is... well, look, it's actually kind of complicated this time, because in my opinion, Harriet is actually the mechanically most solid fight in the game. The way she's designed is just so cool and so clever. It's the perfect blueprint for future Mario bosses, and I really hope that Harriet ends up being Super Mario Odyssey's boss legacy. Which is why this is going to be so weird, because the best boss in Super Mario Odyssey, in my opinion, is Bowser. So look, the Bowser fight is slightly worse designed. It's still really great. They really pulled out all the tricks to make this work, but Harriet is this tiny bit more clever in my opinion. However, boss fight is more than just its mechanics, isn't it? And the Harriet fight just lacks this, it lacks this epicness that the Bowser fight delivers. For this reason, we're going with Bowser today. But don't be sad, Harriet. You're still my favorite bunny girl. Hooray! So here we have it, all bosses sorted into a great tier list. That video honestly turned out to be a bit longer than I expected it to be. Anyway, I hope all of you enjoyed it. You know what? Since this is a boss fight video, let's not do the usual outro song. Let's go with something slightly more epic today. Let's go with this little epic gem from the Paper Mario Origami King soundtrack. Yeah, that's better. So I hope that all of you enjoyed this little video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and maybe you feel especially epic today and want to hit the subscribe button as well. I hope that all of you have a wonderful day and to see you soon. Goodbye!